Hi guys, my name is Laura. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about taking action shots in photography because this is something that a lot of beginner and even intermediate photographers really struggle with, and understandably so. When you're taking action shots and your subject is moving all over your frame, it's really hard to get a good focus, and it's also very easy to introduce blur into your image and to not get a sharp image, which is exactly the opposite of what we want. Not to mention, you might get some really funky facial expressions from your subjects. You may even crop your subject's head out of the photo altogether. So I'm going to give you guys 7 concrete tips to get those amazing shots that we've all seen on Instagram of the girls flipping their hair out of the ocean with the water frozen perfectly in the frame. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that today. So if you guys have not already, I would really appreciate if you go and like this video, subscribe to my channel if you guys like my content. Okay, let's get started. So the first tip that I have for you guys is to use a fast shutter speed. A lot of you guys probably know this, but if you don't, your shutter speed is simply how long your shutter stays open for. And the faster our shutter speed, the more we're gonna be able to freeze motion and get that sharp image. Whereas if you use a slower shutter speed, we have a lot higher chance of introducing motion blur into our photo, especially when we're taking pictures of subjects that are moving quickly. So the general range for action shots, AKA for a subject that's moving, would probably be between 1/500th to 1/1000th of a second. Obviously, depending on how fast your subject is moving, you can play around in that range. You're gonna want to use a much faster subject for a bullet train that's shooting by than you would need to use for somebody that's just walking by in your frame. So play around with that, but definitely use a faster shutter speed in order to adequately freeze motion and just avoid getting blur in your image. Blur is something that you cannot fix post-process. Yes, we can sharpen the image a little bit in Photoshop, but if you have a really blurry image, there is no fixing that. Okay, my next tip is to play around with continuous mode. If you guys have never heard of continuous mode, it is so clutch. Basically what you do is every time you press down on the shutter, continuous mode is going to take multiple different frames. Whereas if you're in single shot mode, every time you press the shutter, your camera only takes 1 frame. And the reason continuous mode is so helpful for action shots photography is because obviously you're increasing your chances of getting an amazing image by just taking so many more shots. So all those like weird body angles and facial expressions and stuff, you're gonna get a lot of duds. And so putting your camera on continuous mode is gonna allow you to take so many different photos, and each one of those shots is a chance for perfection and that action shot that we are looking for. So the way that you will do this on your SLR camera is the same dial at the top where you adjust manual mode and automatic mode. On the back, there should be an S, a CL, and CH. And S stands for single shot, CL stands for continuous low, so it's gonna take a few different frames every time you press the shutter, and CH stands for continuous high. It's gonna take a lot of shots every time you hold down that shutter. So definitely play around with that. And I have another really cool tip for you guys that have iPhones. So this is a feature that's only available for newer iPhones. It is called burst mode, and it is exactly the same thing as continuous mode on an SLR camera. iPhones are just getting so good these days. So the way that you would go into burst mode and use burst mode is to go ahead and open your camera on your iPhone just like you would normally do to take a photo, and that little button that we normally just tap to take one shot, instead you're gonna press, hold, and swipe left, and the longer you pull that out, the more frames it's gonna take. So if you just do a short little pull, it'll just take like 3 to 5 shots. If you hold it over for a longer period, it'll take like 10 to 12 shots, and that is such a great tip for using your iPhone to get good action shots. Okay, third tip for you guys, shoot in JPEG over shooting RAW. Now, a lot of people have probably told you that you should be shooting in RAW, and that is true most of the time because RAW images have so much more data in them, and therefore we can do so much more with them post-process. There's so many more different opportunities as far as editing goes and to fix images. But with action shots, we are taking so many photos at once, and your camera is just like a computer. It needs time to store data, especially if it's really big data. And JPEG images are just a little bit more manageable for your camera. So it's not going to get frozen or backlogged. You're not going to be creating as much of a bottleneck if you're shooting with JPEG instead of shooting with RAW. My fourth tip for you guys is to play around with shutter priority mode. Now, if you're not familiar with shutter priority mode, it's basically when you set the shutter and the camera sets everything else. So it's kind of like a hybrid mode between automatic and manual mode. And I have to admit, I always shoot in manual mode, and I really never shoot in any other mode, which is probably something that I should work on, because shutter priority mode can be really, really clutch. Basically, an example of this would be, let's say you're shooting outside and the sun is constantly going behind the clouds and then coming out from the clouds, going behind the clouds, coming out from the clouds. If your lighting is constantly changing like that, manual mode is going to be like a pain. But if you put it in shutter priority mode, you can go ahead and set your shutter to whatever you want, and the camera will figure out the rest. So this is especially good for beginners that are trying to take action shots, and they just, all you want to, the most important thing here is going to be the shutter speed, like I talked about in the first tip. So just set that up, set it and forget it. The camera will literally take care of the rest. My fifth tip for you guys is to work in tandem with your subject. So there's kind of two sides to this story, right? In some cases, we are not going to have any control over our subject. Let's say I'm shooting a professional volleyball match and I really want to get a picture of one particular player spiking the ball. Obviously, you're going to want to set yourself up for success. Where are they typically spiking from? We want to get their facial expression, right? So we should go on the other side of the net from them. Do you want to shoot from high or from low? Where is the blocker usually? Where is the net? Let's make sure that the blocker and the net is not going to be in front of their face if possible. So just kind of set yourself up for success and think logically. If you're shooting a soccer game, you're probably going to want to go down towards the goal, because that's where most of the action happens, right? Depending on which player you want to capture. If you're shooting with a subject that you can direct, that is even better, because obviously now you have the opportunity to set up your shot for success, which is huge in photography. I think when people see most images, they're like, oh, the photographer got lucky or whatever the case is. No, these images were literally built from the ground up, created. The photographer probably thought very strategically about exactly how to capture their image. So an example of this would be, a lot of times when I shoot couples, I'll do a walking shot, and they might be walking towards me, walking away from me, whatever. A lot of the time when we first start shooting, they're thinking about walking, so they're making funny facial expressions, or one will be looking at the camera and the other will be looking at the other person, or sometimes their walk just looks like a little funny depending on where exactly I capture it. So an example of something you can do is having them both take a step forward and then just step back and step forward and step back. This way you're not like running trying to capture it, and you're just keeping the situation very controlled. My next tip for you guys is a good one. So if you guys stuck around, you are in luck. If you use this technique in combination with continuous mode, you are going to be on another level with your action shots. So pre-focusing is when, it's exactly what it sounds like, obviously. It's when you pre-set your focus. And obviously you cannot use pre-focusing in every instance. You can only really use it in instances where you know where the action is going to occur. So I'll give you an example. This shot is a photo that I took of my cousin, and I wanted to get a cool picture of her blowing this glitter out. But every time that I tried to take the photo, my camera just got all discombobulated and confused. It didn't know where to focus. It wasn't getting the focus in time enough in order to capture all the glitter looking really nice like that. So I pre-focused on her, and right before she blew, and then said 1, 2, 3, she blew all the glitter and it came out perfectly. So the way that you're going to pre-focus on an SLR camera is by doing a half press on your shutter until you hear a beep, and then basically that means that the camera is focused and ready to go wherever you told it to. And then right when the action happens, just press down on the shutter, and it won't do any of that stuttering that it normally does where it doesn't know where to focus. And you can actually do this on your iPhone as well. So the way that you do it on an iPhone is to just go ahead and open your iPhone to take a photo like you normally would, and then tap on the screen wherever you want it to focus. And when AEAF lock comes up, that is where the focus is going to stay no matter where you move. Okay, my next tip for you guys is less of a tip and more of a technique, and it is called panning. And panning is basically when you introduce back a little bit of that motion blur we talked about in the beginning that we were trying to get rid of, but in a strategic way to creatively show motion. So the way that you're going to set up panning is you're basically just going to decrease your shutter speed back down a little bit, and then you're going to move the camera in the same direction as whatever subject that you're working with. So I'll give you an example here. This is a photo of my friend Kate that I took in a park, and she was leaping from the left side of the image to the right side of the image. I lowered my shutter speed probably to 1/30th of a second and had her jump from the left side of the screen to the right, and I moved my camera at the same time, and we got this awesome motion blur in the background that really emphasizes in a creative way her movement, which is exactly what we wanted. Okay, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment below any questions that you guys have, and I will catch you guys on the next one. If you're taking a picture of a bullet train that's going by, you're gonna wanna bump that up all the way to 1/1000. So obviously, hi, my name is Laura. Welcome back to my channel. You sound so fake right now. I'm going to let